Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to Adobe Live. I am your host, Chris Blackstock, and we are here with the wonderful Shauna Lynn. Hello, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Doing very good. Please join us here. You can join the Adobe Live community. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us at Adobe Live on Instagram for the latest streams, updates, and more. Hello, chat. Hello, Sam Peterson. Hello, moderator man. Very excited to have everybody here. I see some familiar names. Clever Devlin. Hello, hello. Joshua Merrill. Paco, what's up? Thanks for doing this for our tech. Oliver Andrews. Hello, everybody. As always, please let us know where you're chiming in from. If you have any questions or anything, always feel free to ask. And so, yeah, we're so excited. We've got Shauna Lynn, and we're doing some illustration today in Photoshop. And I believe it's still Mermaid. So, Shauna, could you please just tell us what we're doing today and where we're going to end up?
Yeah. So I'm going to do an illustration for Mermaid today because it's Mermaid for one more day.
Woohoo.
And I have managed to do one mermaid prior to that this month. And that was like the beginning of the month. And it's a little mermaid in a bathtub. Otherwise, I've had no chance to do it here. I've got my little portfolio up. So it was this little one that I got to do.
That's so cute.
Thank you. Yeah, I was stuck in a weird, like, not really a burnout, but like an in-between period where like what I was drawing didn't look like what I wanted it to look like in my head. And so things like weren't quite matching up. So that was like 4 months that happened. And this was the first piece that I did that finally broke that streak.
Yeah, well,
So
it's an awesome little design there. So cute. Love the colors.
thank you. And then I did this little one last night because I realized I hadn't drawn much all weekend. I was instead playing a lot of Animal Crossing, as one does.
I'm surprised it wasn't Zelda. I feel like that's been occupying everybody's time lately.
Yeah, I haven't bought that yet. I need to, because I'm trying to I'm avoiding spoilers and stuff on like Twitter and stuff. Not that people are doing any spoilers, but I haven't.
Yeah, get it going fresh.
Yeah, I have not delved into that one yet because I was just like, if I go in, I'm gonna end up being up to like 3 a.m. playing this game.
Oh,
There's
definitely.
no way to stop it. Yeah.
So yeah, what else you got on here that you'd like to see?
So the last time you and I were on a stream together was, you said, October 2021, and that was right when I was starting the children's book journey. So if anyone doesn't know who I am, I'm a children's book illustrator and lettering artist, and I got known early on for my lettering. And then in 2020, I take that back. I was already, October 2020 was when I started. I signed. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The last several years
You're deep in the game already. Yeah.
Yeah. The last several years are quite a blur. So 2020, I realized I was not feeling totally fulfilled with the work I was doing. And so it just, like, things lined up in a way that I was able to take some time to really explore children's book illustration, because I had wanted to do it for a long time, but avoided it for a long time. Mostly because if I said I'm an illustrator, it was always followed up with someone going, I wrote a kid's book and I've been looking for someone to illustrate it. And I'm like, no.
Oh, yes.
No.
Oh, yes.
So
here's $500. Can you do 32 pages?
Exactly. So I was just like, I just avoided it for so long, and it kills me because I'm actually not bad at it. And so I ended up October 2020. I reached out to 2 different agents, and it was before I had any kids book work in my portfolio at all. So it was like it was a long shot, but I was just like, I'm going to see. One of them wrote back within 2 hours, and then he signed me 3 months later, about 3 months later. Because we had said, like, I want to see what your stuff looks like in like this, for this age and this age, I want to see characters. And so I went into a very deep, like, hyper focus for like 3 months, where I learned how to really do characters, figured out what that style looked like in my hand. And then he signed me February 21. And so October 21, I was already working on my second book, which first book had not even been sent off to print yet. It got sent off January 4th last year. So this came out last July. And it's called The Monsters on the Broom. And it's just a cute little board book, but I got thrown into the deep end on this one because it was it's a lot of cutouts.
Right.
And so, and I'd never done a kid's book prior to this. So like a lot of cutouts, and everything had to make a scene when it
Mm-hmm.
was closed. Make sure I'm turning, there we go. It had to make a scene when it was closed, but then they all had to line up on the following page.
Very cool.
So it was a trial. It was fun, and I had a lot of fun doing it, but it was definitely a big challenge for the very first one I did. And then
All right.
yeah, and then the last time we were on stream together, I was working on this one, which came out in February, which
Awesome.
is called Dirt and Bugsy, and it's for about age 6, and it's just about two little boys who like to go bug hunting.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's
All
really cute,
right.
and I'm
Well, yeah, everybody check
yeah,
that stuff out. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you finally have you focused on it, you dug into it. I feel like that's really how you kind of get to where you need to get, is kind of get that hyper focus. And I
yeah,
think that's where we're going to get today, the hyper focus on this
yeah,
mermaid. Looks like we've already got some work going here.
yes.
What do we got? We got some preliminary stuff.
Yeah. So I realized early on that like I would not be able to get this whole thing done on the stream, and I get really intimidated on stream trying to come up with ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, this took me probably like it was probably a total of 6 hours of drawing to finally hit an idea. Because my original plan, I wanted to do a little shark mermaid because I love sharks.
Mm-hmm.
I am I have a huge love of them. I think they're really awesome. I would never want to be in the water with one, but I love them. And so I was going to do this cute little like leopard shark, and
Mm-hmm.
I did some like preliminary studies of it, like what would the tail look like, how would that connect, stuff like that. And then I realized that I was trying to draw her in different positions, and the shark fin just it wasn't working how I wanted it to.
Right.
So like I have one part of here I did not. So these were like initial like gesture drawings to try and see what I could make work, and this was kind of the closest I got.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it wasn't totally working, and so I started exploring just what would it look like if she were a deep sea mermaid, and I then realized I love anglerfish. I think they're so
Yes.
ridiculous.
Yes.
So I was like thinking of different ideas, like should she be perched on a rock, and then should she be looking at it, should she like should the composition circle it? And then I just started playing more with like what if I used the paper size like as the boundary. So I played a bit
Mm-hmm.
with that, and then ended up coming up with this little one, and that finally worked out. And then it was several iterations of drawing the anglerfish until he worked, and I just scrapbooked him in basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Love it.
so then once I nailed that down, that's when
Yeah.
I jumped into this. So this is what I threw in here. I added rocks, bubbles, and I'm really happy with how it looked because it's very cute and I'm very proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I cleaned it up, and then I changed her hair a bit because I realized it was a little bit too much Little Mermaid Ariel.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and if she's a deep sea mermaid, she's probably a little bit rougher around the edges. So we've got this cute little composition that came about because of that.
Yeah, I
Um,
love it. And you kind of were able to still kind of make it confined with those rocks, like how you were talking about using the borders of the page. You still kind of able to do that with the rock structures.
yeah. And then from there, so when I draw, like I love drawing in colors. I do not like drawing in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that works really well for me because I start with light and then I just go darker and darker, darker until I'm at a dark color. But if I have to send it to a client, I have to like convert it to black and white, because I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally sent it with just color sketches and the client going, well, I don't want it in that color. And I'm like, that's
Yeah. You have to be really clear with what's going to be delivered.
yeah, it's very rare
Yeah.
that I can send it to someone. They're just like, yeah, cool, that works. So
Yeah.
I do make sure to change that beforehand. But so I ended up, I've done separate documents for each of these, so I could easily show the steps that I went
Awesome.
through. But so I've got my little shark mermaid, and I'm going to turn off the colors here. So we had her, and then I decided I was going to do some just quick little like color references because I didn't know necessarily what color I wanted the composition to be. I knew that I wanted them to be the focus,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't sure how I was going to make that work and make the colors work nicely together. And so ultimately, like, I came up on this one on the bottom, which ended up working really well. I was looking at a few different books for reference, and so this one I was looking at a graphic novel called Nightlights,
Mm-hmm.
by Lorena Alvarez Gomez, I think is her name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the cover has these really nice deep purples, deep blues, but then this little pink highlight. And I thought this may work. And it just happens that anglerfish are, from what I can tell, they actually may be a little bit of a burnt orange color. So
Yeah.
I ended up going from there and throwing the color in, and then I just did color flats so that I had something to start with. So
Yes,
now I can
definitely.
like dive in, but I wanted to be able to show you kind of like how I do the flats. So I've got a little bit I can do with the flats, and then I'll start going into detailing and
Awesome.
stuff. So yeah,
Yeah,
here
let's
we
do it.
go.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, we've got a nice setup to start with. Because like you said, I mean, we've got time, but never enough. Never enough time.
Yeah, absolutely never. And when I started drawing her too, I actually had her hair this color, and then I wanted to darken
Mm-hmm.
it and make it a little more vibrant, because the work I tend to do is I tend to go like super vibrant,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not I intend to. So I have a challenge for myself, like later on when I have some time, to
Mm-hmm.
do a whole piece just in pastels.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
where's Sally goes, oh hey Mark, my friend Mark's here.
Oh, hello. Um, so yeah, as you're working on this, and it is a good
Yeah.
question. And Peter's asking, how did you kind of go about finding an agent? Was it something you just kind of looked up on the internet and just reached out to a few people, or was there agents that you knew about prior to this, or what was your kind of process?
Yeah, so there were a few children's agencies that I had been looking at, and one of them was one that repped some of my favorite artists, and then the other one was also one that also repped some of my favorite artists, but had a bit
Okay.
of a very different roster. Um, and so I had reached out to both of these agencies, and it was the second one that I reached out to, who I happened to know the agent that I reached out to. I'd met him years prior when he worked at Abrams Kids as the creative director.
Okay.
Um, but I reached out to him and I just said, I don't know if you remember me, but we met when I toured the office when so and so worked there, and I'm really interested in this is something I'm interested in pursuing, but I don't have anything yet. Um,
Right. Right.
and on the website, so this was the cat agency. It said his disclaimers, like, if you don't hear from me in 2 weeks, consider it a no. And he wrote back in 2 hours.
So it was a good sign.
It was a very good sign. And he was like, of course, I remember you. I've been following your work for the last 6 years. Like, I love it. Like, let's chat. And so we started talking later that week, and he broke down just like a very rough breakdown of kids' books. Like, how does this work? What are we looking for?
Mm-hmm.
What do we look to do? And one thing that I did look at on the roster was, would my work fit aesthetically without looking like anybody else?
Right.
That was my big thing. Because I was on a roster years ago where when I was first signed, I was the only one doing the style that I did. And then over the next 3 years, they had a couple of people come on that were getting hired and doing my style. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, it was a struggle, and I don't want to ever feel like I'm competing with my roster. Um,
Right.
and so when we got on the call, he was like, so I need to see, character work, because you don't have any character work. And I said, okay, I can do that. So he goes, so it's a not right now, but let's check back in a couple months. And I said, okay, perfect. And we're going right into the holidays. So like, I didn't have really any client work at the time anyways. So I was going to be drawing no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward to January, he had messaged me on Instagram, and he's like, so how's the character work coming? And I sent him what I had been working on, and then I heard nothing. And I was like, dang it, I screwed that up.
Mm-hmm.
So a few weeks later, I pulled everything together into a PDF, and I sent him an email, and I just said, hey, I wanted to touch base and show you where I'm at right now. Like, I know I still have to work on, A, B, and C, but I have worked on, XYZ. And he wrote back pretty quickly, and he said, "Hey, I will look at this after lunch, and I'll thanks for sending it over. I'll look at it after lunch." I said, "Cool." It's like not even an hour later, he emailed me, and he's like, "Hey, this is fantastic. Have I sent you our contract yet?" And I was like, did I just get signed? And I got
Yeah.
signed that day. And then they announced me in April. So he signed me in February, and then it was getting everything set up, getting art together, getting my debut image together. He had me make a list of 100 things that I like to draw, which
That's cool. That's a cool
it's
idea.
really hard to think of 100 things
That's
you like to draw.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. It's like tables, chairs, rugs. No.
That's kind of how it happens. It's like, and as you get more into it, like, then you're like, oh, I like this, but then I also like drawing this, and then I also like drawing this, and I like drawing this. And it's kind of like you look at your work as a
Right.
whole and you see what themes are there.
Right.
At the time for me too, it was a lot of, I love doing spooky cute. And so it was a lot of like Halloween stuff, which
Right.
appropriately enough, the first thing I got hired for was a Halloween book. So
There you go.
it worked out really well in my favor. And so that's how I got an agent. It was a little more, I think it was a little more unconventional, but he's also signed other artists where he's been the one to reach out to them. He reps Kyle Webster.
Okay.
So I see Kyle a lot in our Slack group.
Awesome.
Yeah, but he's got a really talented roster.
So a little bit of, networking that had happened years prior, which is a big thing. I mean, people ask a lot about school and, getting involved with conventions and, other communities. It's like, this is why those things are important, is because over the years, you'll just end up meeting a lot of people. And if you're dedicated and you're serious, and this is something that you want to do or pursue, whatever it is, people start to recognize that after a while, even if you don't think they are. It's really just about continuing the journey and the process, because and eventually, you're gonna get somebody else that recognizes that. So that's a really cool thing that ended up happening, because I'm sure you were pretty nervous reaching out at first and be like, nobody's gonna love me.
Yeah. Well, and it was definitely
terrible.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there in that way. And I always say, like, if you're networking, don't network, make friends. Because if you're networking, it's pretty obvious if you're networking, like, because it's very business. But if you're connecting with someone on a friendship level, you're connecting with them on a level that's not just work, you never know where that might lead. Like, I've recommended friends for projects I couldn't take on. I've received jobs because my friends couldn't take them on. And it's just a matter of, like, a lot of times clients will just say, do you have anyone you'd recommend? And they'll trust your recommendation.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, you don't want to force anything, it's okay to be persistent. It's okay to, kind of be a go-getter, get out there. But there is something to be said about letting things happen organically, and things aren't always going to work out the way that you see them working out. And that's okay, because there could be another opportunity around the corner that you have no idea about. And like you said, you don't want to just be meeting people just to get something from them, right? Like that. Yeah. Nobody wants that. It's like you want to make connections. It's like you want to connect to people, either like-minded people or about something they do, or be able to share, knowledge with each other. And so that's definitely true. It's like networking, it really is just about connecting with people, right? And just making friends and sharing knowledge.
Yeah. And it's one thing I have noticed too over the years is, like, I can tell when someone's using me to get to somebody else, and I can tell when someone's being genuine.
Yeah, and that's an icky feeling. Nobody wants to be used to.
Yeah, there were two people, and there were two people that were, kind of not really in my life, but I ran into them at a lot of different things, and they were ones that did use me for the stepping stone to get to somebody else. Like, they weren't coming to me with a genuine interest. It was, how you doing? How you doing? How did you get this? Can you recommend me for this? And and I'm happy to recommend my friends for things as long as they are, if they're true friends, I will recommend them no matter what. So, and I'm very much an open book. Like, I'm happy to talk about how things, come about.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we have this shadow. I'm going to do her tail fin.
Love it.
Select this color. I'm trying to think, I'm open to chat giving suggestions too, by the way.
Okay.
So
some color suggestions.
Maybe. Okay. What if we pull anglerfish's color kind of into her tail?
Ooh, there you go. Kind of have some kind of connecting point there.
Yeah.
Harmony.
We're gonna try it. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. We'll figure something else out. Oh, I see Mariana. Hi, Mariana. She knows she knows all about the stories of the people who have tried to use me for things.
She knows the journey.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're a professional in the industry at any point, like you've definitely had that sort of thing happen at some point or another.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like anything. It's you're just gonna run into people that either don't understand how that makes people feel. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't ever feel like there's ever really like malintent with any of those things. I just genuinely think some people don't understand the process or think that there's somehow a shortcut to get to where they want to get to. And usually it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Most people are where they are through hard work, persistence. There's also luck and timing, but usually with hard work and persistence, you can accomplish a lot of things.
Yeah. And someone can help get your foot in the door, but it's your talent that's going to keep you there.
Exactly. You could make all the connections in the world, but if you don't have the skills, the likability, the imagination, it's not going to do anything for you.
Yeah. Like back in the old days when Adobe was on Twitch only, they were looking for someone who did lettering, and my friend Sid was one of their illustration streamers. And so Sid recommended me to Gus, and then Gus brought me on, and I think I had like a trial stream to see how it went. And then he kept me on after that. And it's just, Sid got my foot in the door, but my ability is what kept me going. And, here, that was probably 2014 or 2015, I think. And
yeah,
so it's been, I could be wrong. And if Gus is in chat, or if Paco knows, they may know when the years, the days of old when we were only there.
Yes.
But it was a weekly stream. It was 3 hours once a week, and you could do whatever you wanted, basically.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you miss those times?
I do. It was a lot of fun, but it was also, we built a really big community. And then it moved to Behance, and that's worked out really well, as too.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then I think they moved off Behance around when Twitch started like not supporting the art streaming as much. Like there was a whole thing that happened with art streaming, and so everyone was just like, all right, bye.
Did it move more into gaming? Was that kind of?
Yeah, it was because it was always a gaming platform, but there was I can't remember what the exact thing was, but they did something where it really affected art. And so a lot of the artists were like, why should we stay here? This is not going to help us at all. Right.
Let's see. Gosh, I feel like I'm going to say this name wrong, but Srinivasan says, what's your favorite feature in Photoshop? For me, it's content aware fill, which is a very good feature.
I will say that's a really cool feature, because I will use that if I have to add bleed to projects now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which works if it's not a super, like it would work really well if I had to add bleed to this, because it's just extra,
Yes.
it's just an extra step I don't really have to do as far as coloring.
Right, because you're
Um,
working in print all the time now. It really is formatting and bleeds and making sure your colors are true. And
mhm. And then I guess like the one thing I do wish that Photoshop had would be like a bleed feature, so that like how Illustrator has that, and InDesign, all that. I wish
yes.
that there was a little bit of a bleed feature so that I didn't have to just
Mm-hmm.
put lines in there and have my rulers set up.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
oh, okay, we've got confirmation. Paco and Sam both say it started towards the latter half of
2015.
2015. So I came on, I think, in 2016,
Okay.
possibly.
This is a
Yes.
while ago. Yeah, my first experience with Adobe Live, I think, was in 2019.
Oh wow, yeah.
So, and that was went into the studios in San Francisco.
I miss those days.
Yeah, that was really fun. I had a blast doing that. The 3-day romp.
Yes. I had
And now,
fun on those.
yeah, it was cool because I had lived in San Francisco for over 10 years, and it was fun to go back um, and go see some old stomping grounds, but also, making art for 3 days, it's always fun.
Oh yeah. My first in-person stream was out there with them, and I'd never been to San Francisco before, so it was a whole new
Hmm.
experience.
Yeah.
Um and I remember I tacked on a couple extra days because like I said, I'd never been there. So I wanted to make sure I had
Hmm.
time to experience stuff. So I remember going to like Fisherman's Wharf, which was fantastic because I
Hmm.
love seafood.
Hmm.
I went to the Walt Disney Family Museum, and
Yeah.
just
Very cool.
and I met up with a few of my friends that had moved out there. So it was really nice to not only see the Adobe offices and hang with the Adobe crew, but also, make some experiences myself.
Yep.
Um, and there was also one stream where they, because remember they'd have like the screen right in front of you, so you could see the chat enlarged as it was going.
Yes.
And there was one day I was Paul was my host that day, and all of a sudden he just
Hmm.
goes, Shauna, look at the chat. And I looked up and everyone's yelling Shauna, and I look and there's someone in the chat commenting, and he's just writing hey, and it was a dude with my last name, um which
Which
it
seems rare.
it's yeah, I mean there are a lot of people out there with it, but generally they're in the Ukraine.
Right.
And there's also a couple varying spellings of it, but as far as like one that matches mine is very rare. And it was this guy out in the Ukraine who was a web coder, and realized that we are actually related.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
but he just this random guy popped into the chat, and he's just like, hey, and I was like, and they're on stream too. There's a video on YouTube of the replay where you can watch me just go into this moment of disbelief where I'm just like, are we related?
Adobe Live connecting families.
It was crazy. It was
That
so
was
fun
pretty
though.
that was a pretty interesting one. So how do you say your last name? Because I haven't
Um,
heard it.
yeah, okay, so it is Ukrainian, and I learned that I was saying it wrong for years because it got Americanized and then it
Hmm.
got Southernized.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
yeah, because we lived in Florida and my dad is a dentist and no one could say his last name, so he was always Dr. P. But so if he introduced himself, he'd always say, I'm Dr. Panchezin, because no one could say it. But the actual pronunciation I've learned in the last like 10 years is Panchishin.
Panchishin.
Yeah, Panchishin. So it's like Pahnchishin, Panchishin.
That's not too
Um,
bad.
no, it looks scarier than it is.
It looks much scarier, and most of the Eastern European last names can be very scary looking. A lot of consonants
Yeah,
shoved together. You're like,
and it's
yeah.
and
My
it's
my
really
wife,
interesting.
she's
Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
think it's Yazikowski,
Oh wow.
so
Okay.
very Polish, um, but similar situation where it's just like her grandfather ended up changing their last name because nobody could pronounce it, so they just changed it to Ryan.
Oh, that's a way to do it.
Yeah, after Nolan Ryan, the Texas Rangers pitcher.
That's kind of adorable, actually.
So yeah, but yeah, those names can be pretty hard, especially by the time, if your family's been here for a while in America, that a lot of that gets lost. So it's pretty cool to finally hear it the right way.
And I actually learned it because I found my great grandfather was an amazing dude, as was my grandfather, and both of them were surgeons. My great grandfather was he was a well-known doctor in the Ukraine, especially in Lviv, or Lviv, I think is what it's pronounced, Lviv, which is unfortunately where all the turmoil is right now. So
Right.
we don't know if, like, there's a statue of him. We don't know if that's still standing.
Wow.
There's also what was his old house was donated to the state, and it's now a medical museum. And then there's a street called Panchishna Street. And it just happens on YouTube. There are 2 different documentaries about him.
What?
Yeah, really short ones, but he was like kind of lost to history for a while. And so in the last 10 years or so, they've started to do like people you should know type of stuff. And he's among that people you should know.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And it was really cool because I was watching it one day. It's in Ukrainian. I do not speak the language. I wish I did, but I don't. But context clues, I could kind of figure out what it was about, because it was about his life. And I just remember saying, I just remember, I was kind of like watching and listening, and I looked away for a moment, and they started talking about Marian and Yurik Panchishina, and I was like, hold up. And I look up, and there's a picture of 2 little boys, and I stopped. I'm like, hold up. I was like, that's my grandfather.
Oh,
so
man.
Not only is it a documentary featuring my great grandfather, my great grandmother, my grandfather and great uncle are in there as well.
Wow.
So it's really like kind of crazy. And then my uncle and his wife do a lot of research into the family as well. So they've found a lot of things that they've sent over to me too cool. about that side of the family. So it's been kind of, family history's fun.
Oh yeah, especially if you're a mermaid. I'm sure it gets even more interesting.
Oh yeah.
Is this a kelp wrap that I'm seeing here? Is this a seaweed?
Yeah, I was thinking like seaweed.
Yeah, I like this idea. This is very cool.
Yeah, I was thinking seaweed, and then she still kind of has those like leopard shark markings because I wanted to keep that kind of.
I like that idea, and I can understand. It is kind of it is harder with the dorsal fins and everything, and trying to get that.
Well, and
it doesn't have the same smooth shape that that mermaid tail has.
No, but like I had so much fun drawing this, so I'm kind of sad the shark thing didn't work, but I think I may attempt it again at some point.
Yeah, and you might be able to tweak it somehow. Take some creative license to make it work for you.
Yeah, because I was trying that, but doing the tail sideways, like for the shark, I mean, it has to be up and down, because if you do it sideways, it doesn't read right.
Right.
And then I was like, how do they sit? If their tail goes like this, how do they sit?
So as you're making this, is that line work going to show up at all, or is that going to be completely pushed back?
So what's going to happen is I'm going to actually draw it in. So I did a mock-up of the mermaid kind of here. So this is like a rough idea of what she was going to look like. So there's very like painted line work. So it's going to be stuff like that. Gotcha. Yeah. So I just have to finish getting this flat in. I don't know. Should we have pieces of seaweed kind of flying around? Like it's not totally.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that kind of breaking that shape. It's nice.
Kind of like that's what the little ties or something.
Yeah.
And then, so I'm just going to pop in. I'm going to do her face, and then we'll start adding details.
Perfect. And if you are joining us just now, we are with Shauna Lynn, a child book illustrator extraordinaire, and we are working on the final day of Mermaid. It is leaving us a final day, but maybe there's one more day. I think there's 31 days in May, close to the last day. So
Almost the
working on
last day.
a mermaid illustration. It's very cute. This is a deep sea mermaid. Don't think we see those very often. So yes, if you have any questions, please let us know in the chat. If you're on YouTube, welcome. And if you want to watch us on behanceb.net/Adobe Live, please come join us. And we are working in Photoshop exclusively today, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I use Fresco often, but I still really love Photoshop.
Oh yeah, Fresco is great. And what is your brush that you're using currently?
So I make a lot of my own brushes.
Very cool.
This one is a modified. I did I think it was like a pen tip I scanned in or something. Like I dotted it on a paper. But it's that and then modified. So this one in particular is like a pencil-y kind of crunchy texture.
Yeah, it's got that little bit of a bleed look on the outside. Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah, and I like it because it feels I really like the feeling of things looking very hand rendered. Because when I first started like freelancing and stuff, and I was doing illustration, I was doing a lot of lettering, and I knew how to make lettering that looked like chalk. But the trick to doing it back then was you drew it in pencil, scanned it in, and then inverted it. And then once Kyle's brushes started to kind of pop up places, that's when I all of a sudden was able to kind of start, like I realized I could potentially make a realistic look in Photoshop without having to do the pencil part. And so I started with his brushes and learned how to do that. And it was like his brushes I would like modify here and there based on like what I was looking for. Yeah. And then over time I was like, I'm going to try making one. Yeah. And so it's just kind of, if I can't find the look I'm going for in one that I already have from somebody else, then I sit and I just experiment until I get that look from my own. Yeah.
And, I think that is an inevitable step that most artists take that are digital artists. I mean, even traditional, you kind of end up with your own brushes that you like or customize. But like you were saying, kind of exploring your own personal style more and how you can stand out and kind of, be unique in what you're making. Creating your own brushes and kind of going on that journey, I think is pretty important. Even though that might look like stuff that's already out there, it's like you said, it's like you are customizing it to how you like the feel, the pressure, how, like, what does it end up giving you in the end of and how you paint? Because sometimes with some of those brushes that are, that other packets and stuff, those are made for those artists, and then they were kind of given, to everybody or sold. And I think it is important in the end to kind of customize. You kind of have to really be like, how hard do I press on this thing? Or like, how what kind of taper do I want, or transparency or texture? And I think the more you do it, the more you kind of realize like, I should just probably do this myself.
Yeah. And so many of them are like great jumping off points. Or like I find a few here and there that I like as they are. So there's one by, I think it's Maca Labs is what it's called. And it's like an HB pencil. Let me see if I can bring it dark. So like I did my sketches with this and it looks like a pencil. And
right, you're like, oh, somebody already did this perfectly. Perfect.
Yeah. And it follows the angle really nicely. And so when I'm in Fresco, I use the built-in pencil, but then this is the one I use outside of that.
Very cool.
So it's fun. I enjoy it.
Well, and that's a good process. How you're saying, using Kyle's brushes, it's almost like copying someone else's work at first to kind of learn how to draw or paint or value or color. Same with
Mm-hmm.
kind of creating those brushes. You're like, oh, like how did, you kind of start to reverse engineer it. It's like, how is this made? Or what do these settings do? And why do I like this brush? And
Yeah.
Kyle has so many good brushes, obviously, the master of brush making. That is a really great place to start to kind of exploring that.
Yeah, very much so. And it's fun because you get to learn like what, like you said, what you like, what you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also end up just like as a result learning what works for you and what doesn't. So like there'll be times
Mm-hmm.
that I'll find a brush and I'm like, I just really like the texture it has in this, but I need it to do something else. And I don't like to take someone's, brush and just replace my own texture. If
Right.
I can help it, because I feel it makes me feel bad.
Makes me feel bad.
Yeah, it makes me feel bad. But no, I have a weird little mark here. I gotta figure out what that is. But yeah, so I end up I don't know what that is. Where's that from? I guess we'll find out at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not on my screen. I know that, or it's not like on my Cintiq. So, oh, it's something I did on this. Okay, we're good. I can.
Okay.
Sorry. There we go.
Perfect.
But so I'll look at the texture that they're using, and I try to look and see like how can I go and reverse engineer this? How can I make my own version of this?
Right. Right.
And then it gives me a lot more control in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Getting her little spots in, and then we're gonna do this guy because he's not happy about being held.
No.
Kind of looks a little peeved. So with this, I'm just adding kind of lines a little bit randomly because
Mm-hmm.
once I start like painting, I'll end up going over a lot of them and then redoing them because I've been painting in layers and just having a lot of fun with that.
These almost become retainers in a way, or just kind of place markers for when you paint.
Yeah, like they'll still be there after the fact, but
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be more of a painterly look to them in the end.
Right. They're not precious, right? Like they're gonna be manipulated. They're
sort of like I'm mapping it out basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was one thing I did want to learn this year was like how to get more of a painterly look in the work I was doing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I love the work of like Loish. I think her stuff is fantastic.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, so I ended up doing a lot of studies of her work to see like how does she do this? How does she make this happen? And a lot of it was brushes that had a bit of a transparency to them that would be they'd layer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna name this just so I know this is my flats. If it's a piece for myself, I do not name my layers, and it is to my absolute detriment, but I still don't do it.
Yeah, it's definitely feel like it's hit or miss with me sometimes. Now that working in the animation industry, definitely learned that I have to label everything.
Yeah, I
because it's
imagine you've
not
got like a lot of bits
yeah,
and
it's not just
bobs.
me. It's not just me, manipulating my file. You got either another artist or the art director eventually is going to look at it or tweak things. So kind of learn to make that part of your process. But you're right. I don't think you always have to do it, especially if it's a personal piece. If it's getting in the way of the flow or you making the piece, then it's not worth it. Right.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you're really making a lot of layers, then you should probably do some minimal labeling, just so you're not spending so much time being like, is it on this layer? Is it on this layer? Is it on this layer?
Well, and my toxic trait is I tend to use a lot of layers, and so I've been challenging myself to do a lot of one layer stuff, or like very limited layers. So like flats are one layer, and then the details like this are one layer, and then I'll do one more layer with just additional like little things that I want to fix up. Because there have been times that I have worked on client stuff and I go to label all the layers after the fact, and there's like 200 of them.
That's a nightmare.
And then it's just, wow, isn't this the consequences of my own actions?
That's giving me heart palpitations right now. I don't want to look at
I have one I did a gallery piece, and thankfully it was not like, they don't see the PSD, they just see the final product.
Right, exactly.
But there was a TikTok trend where it was like that soundbite from Harry Potter where he's like, but last year I had 37, how many are there? 36 counted them myself, 36. So I did that with one of the pieces I did for there, and it was like 287 layers.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you could do that in all the programs. Can Fresco handle that many layers?
To a degree it can, but it definitely slows down. Because I just did a piece for my local SCW, Society of Children SCBWI chapter, and I redid it like 3 or 4 times before I finally just said I need to finish this. But then I also went through, and it was getting slower and slower and slower, and my iPad and Fresco, the poor things, were lagging, and I'm just like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm sorry, just a few more minutes.
I went to Lightbox. Let's see, this was back in 2019, right before everything shut down with COVID and everything.
Oh, the very first one then.
Yeah, it was the very first one. And Nicholas Cole was doing a talk there. And I think it's just about working in Procreate on the iPad. But the really interesting part of it was, because Procreate is very limited as far as layers and kind of how big your files can be, it kind of created a workflow built around that. It's like, well, at this size, I can only have 20 layers. So how am I can be economical with that, and how can I work around that, or how can I make this? And the piece he was talking about too was he had done some artwork, I think, for the posters, and it was these like flying whales, alien whales in the sky. And it was kind of interesting because he had basically created 2 different files with more than 20, it wouldn't have worked on one file, but he had worked on 2 files and then ended up like compressing and combining them in the end. But it is interesting. I think as you move forward, you do tend to kind of try to limit so many layers, and you try to find ways of like, how can this be more economical, and how can I work faster and make kind of clearer decisions for myself, so that I don't need so many layers, or but every piece is kind of different. Some pieces I feel a lot more confident with that. I'm like, I'm just gonna hit this, and I already know what I want. And then other ones I'm like, I'm gonna make like 3 copies of this layer, and then I'm gonna tweak this, and I'm gonna add a clipping mask here, and maybe I'll do some hue changes. So definitely.
Are you a backup layer person?
Sometimes I am. I'll do it with my some of my drawings, or it's usually when I'm like, I might go in a different direction, and I'll, it's when I'm experimenting with like, maybe I'm going to tweak this whole part of this section of the drawing, or, preliminary stuff. Then I'll usually just make a quick backup. And I usually end up deleting it later, but I get a little panicked sometimes.
I've done that before. I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to work, so I'm going to make a backup just in case. And then if it does, I can get rid of it later. But I'm
I
like, I
might
don't want to
even
do all that work and
embarrass.
then find out I
Yeah,
just completely screwed myself over. And then,
might even save this as a separate file, and then
yeah,
this is
yeah.
version 2 now. All right, so it is let's see, we're a little over halfway through. It's
Oh no.
11:20 on the Pacific coast here. So yeah, we are with Shauna Lynn. We are doing the mermaid illustration. This is a deep sea mermaid, which is very cool. Shares a little bit of the anglerfish properties here. I kind of love that. Maybe they're cousins. Could it be some weird
Weird
species
familial relations.
crossover? Yeah. But yeah, so started out with just we had sketches, we had some preliminary exploration work, and had some flats. And so now we are, I think, still laying in a few flats, but we're doing some kind of some shadow work, some hue changes. Is that right?
Yeah. So the brush I'm using is one that I ended up developing recently, and it is, let's look at the base of it. It is another one that was from one of my like image stamps, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And but it started with just like the Photoshop standard like soft brush.
Yeah.
Yeah, the soft round brush is where it started,
Mm-hmm.
and then I slowly started adding new things. So I did like a little bit of stuff with the shape dynamics, but not much. Um, I did absolutely nothing with scattering, so I don't know why I have it on, but I do. But the texture is just a really simple, like noisy background that I
Mm-hmm.
made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's set to hard mix so that it's got a little bit of texture at the end there, but it's, see if you can,
Yeah.
if I put it on
Yeah, I
white,
can
you
see
can kind
that.
of see the texture.
Which,
Um,
especially with children's illustration, I mean, it's with all illustration, but I really feel it with children's illustration, like getting the right textures is so key. And it really, because it kind of harkens back to, beautiful pastel drawings or the colored pencils, or like, these gouache
yeah.
paintings, or just all these, different techniques that have been used for so long, and kind of still trying to capture some of that magic with the digital palette.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like the work of like Eric Carle and stuff and
Mm-hmm.
Mary Blair, and it's just so nice to kind of feel like you can still emulate that because, you with kids, like it's, you want to make a good book, but you also want it to be beautiful.
Yes, definitely.
And I know a few people have gone back to doing a bit more of the like traditional, and then they do touch-ups in Photoshop and such.
Right, right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but most of their process is now like traditional, just because they had a period where they're like, I need a break from the computer. Um,
Completely.
but I find that because I can get these textures here and I don't trust my painting skills, I'm able to achieve what I want with this
Mm-hmm.
pretty well.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, it's a time thing, and it can be difficult with, especially with books, anything where there could be a lot of changes,
Mm-hmm.
and corrections, and so it can be really tough doing traditional unless you are kind of the art director, kind of final say. Nothing's worse than completing a piece and and being like, actually, like,
Yeah.
look here, I spent a lot of time. This is not digital. I can't just change it. So
Yeah,
digital
but
gives you a lot of options, but yeah, it's always beautiful seeing traditional stuff as well.
yeah, digital definitely gives a lot of freedom in that regard, especially when it comes to changes. Because like early on when I was doing the digital chalk stuff for clients, I had one client where she reached back out after she had some edits to it, and she's like, I'm so sorry that I'm gonna have to make you redo this on a chalkboard. And I was like, oh, no, 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 this is fine.
Like, I did my job. You thought it was chalk.
I'm pretty sure I told her that exact thing. I was like, no, see, it's digital. And because you were fooled means I did it right.
Yeah, I just finishing up a comic book I've been working on for the last 5 years, and when starting that, it was really like, how can I make this look, not digital? Um, and that was the first, when I was working with the writer, he was like, oh, sorry, like I've got to make this change. This is like on page 1. And I was like, it's cool. Like it's digital. He's like, oh, okay. He had only worked with pen and ink before that. And so, asking for a change after approval was obviously a big no-no, because,
Yeah.
have fun trying to do that. So yeah, it definitely made the process harder in some ways, because there's always that feeling of like, we can go back and change this.
Mm-hmm.
But great in other ways, where you're like, okay, we can go back and change this. It's not the end of the world. I made it so that I can go back and change it. So yeah, it's interesting when you start to kind of marry those worlds.
And it's fun because they're at a point now too with Photoshop where you can make things look so realistic.
Oh, completely. I mean, it'd be pretty hard to tell, if you're just looking at a print, if that person scanned it and printed it, or if that was digital.
Yeah.
Because the brushes are so good now, the technology is so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like what I love about this brush is the fact that like I can turn this off and turn the sketch off, and it up close, you can see all the brush strokes, but from a little further away, it does sort of look painted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
there's,
and having all that texture in the hair, and as you're adding it to the eyebrows, it does. Yeah, it kind of has that almost like pastel, like you could feel the texture.
I do another layer for the tail just because I don't want to mess it up potentially. Yeah, like I'm gonna move on to the tail for a little bit just because I know we're tight on time.
Yeah, I think we got about 30 minutes.
All right, I'm gonna do this in lightning speed is what's gonna happen. So glad I did most of the stuff beforehand.
Yes. Always come with work done. I've learned that over the years. You never start from scratch unless that is the point of the stream.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's fun because then I come in with a plan and I'm like, look, I'm not a hack.
Oh yeah, there's always that feeling. You're like, I know I've done this thousands of times, but I still feel like I might fail somehow.
Yeah. And it's like back in the, like in, again, days of yore, when we would go into the studio and have the live session there. And at that point, it would be a 3-day long stream. So
right.
You could start from scratch. I keep hitting the wrong button.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah, like you could start from scratch and it wasn't as, because you could still get it done in those 3 days. But when you have an hour and a half, you make do with what you got.
Yeah. And you know what? If you want to come on Adobe Live and have the fear of possibly failing, you too can nominate yourself or someone to be a guest on Adobe Live. We're just kidding. It's so much fun. We love the community here. Everybody that comes on here, it's a wonderful learning experience for everybody. So on Behance, up in the top right corner of the chat, guest recommendations, go ahead and click that, fill it out, and let us know. Could be yourself or somebody if you want to see on the show. Please let us know. It's awesome. It's always a fun time, and there's never any failure. You'll be great.
We're
making art. There's no fail when you're making art. Only learning.
Exactly. There's never failing. It's just a little detour.
Just a slight detour. Your ego might get a little bruised, but you'll be fine.
One of my friends growing up, her mom would, when she'd take us places, if she got lost, she'd say, my friend would go, "Mom, are we lost again?" And she'd go, "No, we're on an adventure."
Yeah, this is the journey part of the trip.
Like I think that's the best way to take things in life. It is an adventure.
Yes. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, the journey or the destination. It's like, it's always the journey. It's always the journey. It's always the present moment. That is always the most important part. So this
Yes.
is you and if you're only looking at the destination, it's going to be hard. You've got to enjoy the journey, especially when it comes to making artwork and painting. And it's a long journey. It doesn't happen overnight. And just building the skills, you've got to learn how to really enjoy all of it, because there's definitely going to be some stuff that's not going to be the most fun to learn, but once it becomes a language for you, it'll really, everything will kind of open up.
Yeah. And it's, and you're going to learn every time you create something new.
Oh yeah. And especially, and the more you're willing to kind of have those failures, quote unquote, that's really when you're going to learn. Because if you shy away from taking chances, you're going to have a hard time growing. And the more chances you take and the more you're willing to fail, the faster your skills are going to grow, and the faster your confidence in yourself and what you can do is going to grow. So don't be afraid to take those chances. It's you're already here watching this. I mean, that's a great way to be learning in the first place. So you're already doing it right. But yeah, I just feel like it's the best part about being an artist or creating is being on that journey of like forever learning, right? I mean, there's only so many things where it's kind of, it's a constant learning adventure, and art really kind of gives you that gift.
Yeah, there's no ceiling you can hit.
No, it's really up to you, when you want to stop or it's kind of it's a forever journey.
And every piece that you do, there's always going to be an ugly middle stage, and it's a matter of getting yourself through that.
Oh yeah. So I mean, just laying in the, I'm always, when I'm like laying in the flats, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I mean, I like it sometimes, but at the same time, like, can't someone else do this for me? I just want to get to the fun stuff.
Turn this off. And I mean, it's not terrible, but like it, with the flats off and with this drawing off and stuff, like you can tell it's like there, but it's not great yet because there's not a lot of dimension to it.
Right. Arby says this is Aqua Woman.
Aqua Woman is out there.
Aqua Woman. Oh yes, and Reaver Mike says I watched Mer People on Netflix. Yes, that was my wife started watching that, and I was like, whoa. Yeah. They are loving Mermaid, I'm sure.
It's a month just for them. Yeah, I saw the preview of it, and it was a guy that was going through their list of like fantastic and different words that they use to describe their joy.
Walked in and occasionally while my wife was watching it, and kind of just saw a few moments, and I'm just like, there's something for everybody in this world. Like, if you look hard enough, there's someone else out there that like cares just as much as you do.
Which, I mean, think about it, that's pretty amazing.
It's awesome. I mean, that's why we love our online communities, right? I mean, otherwise it'd be really hard for us to reach out to so many people around the world.
Well, and especially if you have like a really, really like niche hobby with the internet, you're like, I'm not the only one who loves this. And
it's not so niche anymore.
Yeah. And that's beautiful.
Are we gearing up for a mermaid craze? Is what you're saying? We're going to see mermaid tails flying off the shelves.
I think it's already been doing that.
Just coming out. Yeah.
There's people that specialize in making like these silicone mermaid tails.
Oh yeah. I'm sure the craftsmanship that has to go into that is probably pretty high.
All I think is like, if that existed when I was a kid,
we would all do it once. Yeah. It's like, all right, put my mertail on. I'm doing this. This is the right kind of pool. It's big, it's deep. I'm going for it.
And we had a pool. I would have done it. think that's almost
Reverb
too
Mike
hot
was
for
saying
her
that
cheeks.
one lady on the show spent $10,000 on her tail. So there you go. Lucrative business.
More power to her.
Yeah.
That's intense. I did this cheek color, but like I gotta tone it down. It's a little too much.
A little bit of that blush.
Yeah, that's one hard thing is like figuring out like how do we get a blush color going here?
Yeah, you could do that color too. Right. It's red is kind of the default, right? The blush color, but does this
Yeah.
mermaid have red blood? Or like when it comes to the surface, is that the color it would be? Or,
Yeah. And I mean, and it's a mermaid, so anything kind of goes.
yeah, exactly. This is where you take the creative license and you say, what's going to work best for this composition?
Yes, exactly.
It's something I always have to remind myself of, especially when you are working with more realistic lighting, or when you're painting, is that sometimes it's okay to just ignore all the rules and make it look good. Sometimes it's like, yeah, there could be some bounce light here, or this should have some rim light. It's like, but does it work? Because not everything in reality, when you look at it, looks great. It might be realistic, but it doesn't mean it looks great. So
Yeah.
you always kind of have to keep that in mind as in the end, you kind of make your own rules for your piece.
I popped that layer into the wrong section. It was in the flats, and I'm like, why am I not getting any color here? What's happening? It's because I was on the wrong layer. And like some of these too, like where it's flat, I'll add, like I'm adding just a little bit of color where I'm not sure how visible this necessarily is to people, but I
Mm-hmm.
add just a slightly lighter variation of that color. And then I'm just going over it very quickly to give it a little bit of a painted look.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's not so just flat there.
Right.
Like there's one artist who I'm a huge fan of and can call an internet friend is Zoe Persico. And she's really a master at like digital watercolor.
Mm-hmm.
And just I watched a lot of her streams, which kind of is what helped me understand like how this would work. And it just makes so much sense where it's her work is just it's a lot of layering. And she uses a modified version of Kyle's watercolor brushes.
Gotcha. Yeah,
And then
I've done some like digital watercolor work, and I found that, yeah, really is finding kind of the right combination of brushes, because watercolor is tough, and regular watercolor really is. It's not necessarily layering, but watercolor, it's such a funny kind of process of like, it has to be kind of like hyper planned, but at the same time, like there's a ton of happy accidents as well. And so it's like you kind of really have to kind of plan out what you're making, because it's so fickle, it's so easy to mess up, get muddy, bleed, kind of go all over the place. But at the same time, that's what makes it awesome. And so when you're doing it digital, it's like, okay, how can I kind of capture that same feeling, because I have so much control over this, like where, with certain brushes, like where can I kind of still get some of those bleeds and wet edges, or like using like the salt or like the taping, or kind of still getting those same effects, but in a digital space.
Yeah, I remember doing the salt trick when I was learning to paint, because I wanted to be able to paint in watercolor so badly when I was little, and I just never could get the hang of it. And it wasn't until I had an opportunity in college to study abroad in Italy for a month, and I got bored just drawing in pencil, and so I went to one of the art stores and I got a little travel watercolor kit, and all of a sudden, like, things started to make sense, and I started painting a bit more while I was there, and all of a sudden I was like, watercolor is not as bad and terrifying as I thought it would
Yeah,
be.
this is pretty awesome.
It's kind of fun. And and so it was really like, it's really fun when you get the hang of it.
Yeah, and watercolor is one of those really fun ones too, where you can kind of integrate a lot of other materials into it. Like you can bring in colored pencils or just regular graphite or ink, it's kind of like, not like oils, but it could be quick and fast, or you could have a process to it where you're waiting for things to dry so that you can kind of go back over it with like just a little bit of water, or like a really, thick liner brush or so. It's like there's so many different textures you can kind of end up creating.
Yeah.
But with like studies, you can just kind of be really quick with it and kind of gestural, and yeah, it is really fun. And I think because it is watercolor, you don't get as upset with like everything trying to be perfect, right? You kind of just, the fun part is that it's this water, this flow that you kind of just messing with.
You're able to not be so precious.
Exactly.
I remember there's a technique I learned too with acrylic, because that was one of my go-tos that I'd use was acrylic, because it was easy to, it dried quickly. But there was a trick that I learned from another artist who was an acrylic artist, and she'd water down the acrylic and lay it out, and then she would take a bottle of rubbing alcohol with a spray nozzle, and she'd spray it, and it would make this really cool pattern in her paintings.
Very cool. Yeah, spray bottle, that's something that painting with acrylics, like, you should have nearby. One to, if you're mixing big colors or something, or if you just kind of want to keep it fresh, because they do dry so quickly. I always found that was a good idea. But like you said too, if you're doing like kind of washes or stuff where it's kind of just easier to get that water onto the canvas or in your paint than to try to do it manually with just a brush.
Yeah. Great thing about digital though is you don't have to worry about that.
No.
Though it is really cool with fresco, because you can choose like dry layer, and if you're using like the live brushes, like you can choose dry layer, and then you can just go right back over the layers if you're working in real watercolor. And also I think if you lift the iPad while the paint is spreading, it'll
here.
Yeah,
That's
like
so
you
cool.
lift it. I think it goes downwards, like it follows the.
Whatever.
Don't quote me, but I feel like that. I remember that being a.
Well, if it's not like that, it should be like that. So take notes.
Yeah, are you listening, Fresco team? All right, how are we doing on time? We got like 15 minutes. Let's do this.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite quotes a friend of mine said back when I used to scorekeep hockey. He goes, all right, we've got 15 minutes to finish this 45-minute period. Let's go.
Yeah, here we go. How much can we squeeze into this?
If anyone has questions, happy to answer to the best of my ability.
So was making children's book, was that always something that you were interested in, or was there a certain point in time you were like, this is what I should be doing? I know the lettering thing had kind of happened earlier on, but were you interested even when you were doing lettering back then and doing children's books?
To a degree, yes. I was trying to do characters all the way back in like 2013. And it was just one of those things that I just never had a chance to really deep dive into it. And so having, as much as the pandemic, sucked, it did offer me an opportunity to just have some time to really play around and explore. And it was like, I think it was like the more I got into work and stuff, and the more I was in lettering, the more I realized like I don't really, I don't like doing the influencer thing with design. I just really like to create, And when I realized that I wasn't getting the same fulfillment from like editorial work as I used to, that was when I realized I needed to kind of pivot and figure out what I enjoyed. And so it was kind of just like little conversations with myself where like I looked at the stuff that was inspiring me, and a lot of it was children's books.
Right.
And I went in knowing that like I might completely hate this, but I won't know if I don't at least make an effort at it.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out
Yeah,
I
it was
love
something
it.
that something you wanted to explore. And yeah, it's also, there's something so special about being able to tell a story with your paintings, right?
Yeah.
It's just, and for not only for you to experience that, but for little kids and adults, but kids that are kind of, these are some of their earliest memories, right, of like stories and kind of all these fantastical creatures and characters. I think of so many of my influences, and like, yes, there's television and all that, but just the books that I would read as a kid and how much of an influence it had on me. So it's a cool place to be in, that you might impact some children out there with maybe they want to get into this, or maybe it opens up their imagination, or so it's very cool.
Yeah. Well, and the fun thing too is I'm at an age where all of my friends, they're all married. Now they're having kids.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of like my friends' kids are all in that age demographic that I'm creating for. So it's even more fun now that I'm able to, like, I can send them a book and they will read it. They'll send me pictures of them reading it to their kids, or like the Monsters on the Broom. That one was, it's written in a way that it's the song The Wheels on the Bus, but Halloween themed. And so when that book came out, it was July when it came out. And I have friends who their kids are obsessed with it. And so I got tons of videos of my friends' children singing the book.
Oh, so adorable.
Oh my God. My heart was like about to explode. It was so cute. And I asked them, it was like, can I send this to the author? Because she's going to die. Because the author and I actually got to know each other pretty well too once the book was done. She saw everything. And so she and I, we mutually followed each other, and then ended up finding we had a ton in common. So we end up chatting online every now and then.
Yeah, it's so cool when I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old boys. So them experiencing all these things too in the books, and I work in animation, but on a children's show, and so they get to experience that directly too, and be like, oh, dad did some of this work, or like it's such a cool thing to kind of experience that with them. Like I said, just having some kind of impact, it's fun.
Yeah, I used to coach toddlers in figure skating, and I always loved that light bulb moment. You watch them and like all of a sudden it clicks, and they understand what their doing is. And I feel like it's the same with kids' books, like watching them where it like they're looking at something and then it clicks and they're like, oh, that's this,
Right.
And kids are a lot smarter, I think, than we give them credit for at times, because they know if something is incorrect. Like when I did Dirt and Bugsy, like it could be stylistic, but the bugs had to be accurate. Even if they were tiny, they had to be accurate. Because you're going to get that one kid that's obsessed with bugs, and they're going to be like, that centipede only has 30 legs. It's supposed to have that, So it was like
when my oldest son was younger and before he could read, he would memorize the stories. And so if you mispronounced a word or missed a step, he'd be like, pump the brakes, buddy. You read that wrong. Why don't you try again? Maybe you can get it this time. I'm just like, how did you know?
Brutal.
Yeah. But I it's so funny. I was talking to my wife and was like, gosh, they really dumb down kids on television and movies. Like, they're so much smarter than people give them credit for at such an earlier age. But I think
Yeah.
it's a time and speaking part thing when it comes to entertainment. But I agree,
Yeah.
kids are pretty with it.
We had my next door neighbor's kid, when I was growing up, he was obsessed with airplanes.
Awesome.
And the neighborhood we lived in had a fly-in private airport. So it like
Oh wow.
seeing a plane fly, a few hundred feet above your house was very normal.
Mm-hmm.
And but he could look up in the sky and he would look at a plane and he'd say, "Oh, that's a, Cessna something or other." And I'm like, I can't even see that. How do you know that?
It's the silhouette shape.
But he was so obsessed with airplanes that he knew, and he was just like, it was airplanes and weather. He was obsessed with weather too.
Mm-hmm.
So he, like, one day he walked
That's
outside and he was like, "It's gonna rain. Yeah, I think it's gonna rain."
it's gonna rain.
But yeah, I think
So I think we've got 5 minutes here before we close up shop here. Yep.
I knew I wouldn't
So
get this done, but
finish up the stuff you want to finish up here. And I'm assuming we're going to be seeing this on website, social media. Is that correct?
yes, yeah, I'll end up posting it on Instagram as well as my personal website.
Awesome.
And Twitter. Yeah, like on I can do the social handle thing now if you want. It's Twitter and Instagram at Shauna Parmesan, and then on my website is shaunalynn.com.
Perfect.
But if you type in shaunaparmesan.com, it also redirects because that was my website for a long time.
Did you keep that domain, lock that in?
I did, just because I had old like business cards out there, and
you gotta do it. Oh
like,
yeah,
even
I've got like 7 different domains, just being like, I don't know, I might use this later down the line.
Yeah, I used Shauna Parmesan too, because someone said in high school, they're like, "Yeah, don't use your last name, I just call you Parmesan." And I realized going into the real world, I was like, I don't want to buy 10 different domain names just to account for all the misspellings. So I did Parmesan early on, and so it worked out. And then because Shauna Lynn at the time wasn't available as a domain,
Right.
Once it was available, then I bought it, but I kept Parmesan for everything basically. So it worked out.
Yeah, I kind of love that.
Just blocking in the edges again on this. And then
Oliver says only 6 domains. Oh man, how many domains do I need?
Only 6 domains, amateurs. No,
I
actually,
need more.
I don't have many domains, to be honest. Like my side projects, I keep the domains active for, but like my dad had ideas for domains, and so I have all of his, and that's the reason there's like 4 pages of domain names in my account.
Yeah, I had a friend who he is constantly, he'll just be coming up with names and be like, I'm gonna buy that domain. It's just like,
oh, nice.
something that he does. He's just like, I might use that down the line.
Or someone might want it and pay big bucks.
That's right. Little investment.
Yeah, you never know.
All right, we got a couple minutes here. So
all right.
I think we should probably wrap it up and then maybe kind of go back through everything for anybody who's just joining us at the end here, but anybody just wanted to see how we got where we are.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, where we'll end off for now, and I will keep working on this. And it may not get done today. I don't know yet. I have an event I'm going to this evening, so I won't be working this evening. But it started out, these were so anyone who's joined late, like these were my initial sketches. I made a little list of like what my ideas were. The initial plan was I really wanted to do a shark mermaid, and I tried really hard, and it wasn't working. So like I have the sketches that prove I was trying to make it work. And finally I just said, I need to make a decision here, because this is an event that's coming up and I don't want to spend my whole weekend trying to come up with an idea.
Right.
So I ended up coming up with this Little Mermaid, but I still wanted to do something that was like a deep sea mermaid. So we have her with this little anglerfish, which I did multiple iterations from too. In the very beginning, he looked really angry. With this one, he just kind of looks peeved. And then that proceeded into the sketches where, what happened here? Oh, so the sketch started there, and I can actually bring up so that was the sketch when I pulled it into my file. I'm working at
Awesome.
8x10 at 350 DPI because I don't like doing 300. I don't know why. It's just a habit. But so this was the cleaned up sketch where I added in details, changed her hair a little bit, got the fish really fleshed out, and then we worked into flats, which I came into this with. I turn on this. I had this minus like some of these details. This was kind of what was there when we started. We added this shading, and then from there started adding in these little designs. So if I turn off that, you can kind of see where this painterly look is starting to show.
Awesome. I think we're running out of time right now. I'm going to wrap it up real quick, but we're here with Shauna Lynn. Please go check out her work. This is a piece for Mermaid. And if you like plants, grass, hedges, flowers, wouldn't it be nice to create these elements and details quickly when they are not the focus of your illustration? Join Adobe evangelist Kyle T. Webster, we all love him, as he shows you how in a new episode of Photoshop for Artists. Shauna, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Love this illustration. Can't wait to see it finished. And thank you everybody in chat for following along and participating. And hope to see everybody very soon. Stick around if you can. All right, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.